Manali said, maybe we could, how are Google conversions compared to Facebook ads for the same spend? Are Facebook ads and Google searches associated in any way?
Yes, let me find that question though, so that I do visual. I don't know why.
I bet it just
Can you, if you have that thing, can you paste it in the chat just so I can see it?
just deleted it. Isn't that Murphy's Law? I'll go find it though.
Oh, here we go. Yep. How are Google conversions compared to Facebook ads for the same spend? Are Facebook ads and Google searches? So two questions. When we say how are Google conversions compared to Facebook ads for the same spend, are we saying like if you were to put $100 in each network, which one would perform better? Manal, if you want to unmute, we can. Or if we just, no, still here, right?
Hey there. Yes. Yeah, specifically just like a newbie and want to understand if I'm spending ad budget on a Facebook platform versus Google, right? So the main intention is to drive the traffic, come to my website and eventually make the sale happen. So let's say I'm spending like $3,000 per month on Google versus $3,000 on Facebook. Which are the ones that will actually effectively have more sale conversion? Yeah, that's what I'm interested to know.
Got it. So it's kind of a loaded question, and this is going to be both right and wrong. But the general rule of thumb is that Facebook traffic is less expensive. Google's traffic is more expensive. Facebook's traffic is less quality. Google's traffic is more quality. So sometimes, not all the time, but we have seen a fairly good one-to-one comparison where you might spend 1,000 people from Facebook to your website and 10 people buy. You might spend 100 people from Google Ads and 10 will buy. And that traffic both costed roughly the same because you're paying for less traffic, or sorry, you're paying less per person on Facebook, but you get more of them, but they're lesser quality. So the conversion rate's low. So it's kind of like almost an equal paradigm. And not every time. Sometimes it's skewed one way or the other, and it's different every time. So what's interesting is the way that I like to look at it is I like to start on Google first because Facebook is an interruption type of network. Google is intent or inbound driven, which means Facebook is like, hey, I'm just hanging on Facebook. And it's like, do you like socks? And you're like, no, no. Sometimes Facebook's like, do you like socks? You're like, yeah, I love socks. And you have to be right or wrong. On Google, someone's looking for socks or someone's trying to find the best socks to wear for tennis. They're looking for it. Now it's more expensive, but they have more propensity to buy. Depending upon your offer, normally lesser price items on Facebook convert faster and better. It's very hard for me to say like, hey, are you a doctor and needs a $50,000 exam lane? On Facebook, that's hard. But if a doctor is looking for a $50,000 exam lane, I'll pay $20 to get in front of that person. So lower price items, more impulse type of buys tend to perform better on Facebook than not better than Google, but tend to perform better than Facebook than the higher priced items. But you can saturate the market more on Facebook because of cheaper traffic and it's a little bit less expensive. So it depends on what your product is, how much of demand is there, and how likely is that product going to be appealed to the masses rather than the niches. High niche products, I like to go on Google. Less niche products, Facebook tends to perform fairly well. Better than Google? Yes and no. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So if you were saying like which network is better, it depends on the audience, how applicable that product is to that audience. Can you segment by that audience? And is it low enough price that person's gonna say, oh, that's sweet, yeah, I'll buy it because it's $30, $40. Not, oh yeah, sweet, I'll take a $900 lawnmower. But sometimes that doesn't really happen. People don't just have $900 impulse buys. So it happens and it's cheaper traffic, but again, usually that's where Google tends to be a little bit better. So Manali, what was the website that you have?
It's still launching. So my products are going to be more like home decor and jewelry products. So yes, pretty much falling under the impulse buy category. And yes, around the price targets of like $40 to $60. So I was just curious, like people are not going to like actually search for home decor sometimes. It's going to be like, oh, the item is cute, I just want to buy it. So my whole first thought was let's stick to Facebook and Instagram kind of thing. And just was curious, like, how are the conversion? But sounds like maybe Facebook is a way I should also be looking into along with Google for this.
Well, there's another two parts to this conversation. The second part is that your Facebook and ads traffic will work together. So you may have a lot of clicks from Facebook that don't buy, but your Google Ads traffic retargets and converts them. And those two networks work together. The bad part, though, is then you run into an attribution issue. Facebook is going to be view through also attributed from click through. Google Ads is going to be click through attributed with a side of view through conversions. Typically, if you have a Facebook conversion, their default is 1 day click, 20-day view. Now I think it's 1 day click, 7-day view, possibly.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. So 1 day view, 7-day click. Yep, 1 day view, 7-day click. And here's what happens. If I look at a Facebook ad and I click on it and I go to the website and I'm like, that's pretty cool. I'd like to buy that. They don't, and they leave. And then Google comes in and says, hey, remember that product you were going to buy? And they're like, oh yeah. And they click on that ad and then they go and buy. Facebook says, hey, we sold it. Google says, hey, we sold it. So now you spent $1 here, $1 here. You might have made $2. You know, you're basically break even. I'm just saying that's in a vacuum. One click, one sale. You're gonna have two conversions. Both Facebook and Google are gonna say, oh, I did that. Be mindful of anything that you do on Facebook, even if they convert on Google, Facebook could say they converted from Facebook. So that's where that gets a little bit hard to identify. And there's nothing inside of Google and nothing inside of Facebook that allows those two channels to talk to each other. They will just be very selfish in their own ecosystems of attribution. The last and final thing that I wanted to say about the two versions is majority of the time, not every time, Facebook's going to charge you for impressions. Google is going to charge you for clicks. So in smart shopping, I can have 275,000 impressions. And if 2 people click and it's 50-cent click, I only spent $1 on those 250,000 impressions in smart shopping. Facebook, if I'm getting charged per milli or per impression, I'm spending all that money even if no one clicks. So that's where it's kind of nice about Google is like, hey, I'm going to show it to everybody. I'm going to show them the picture of it and I'm going to show them the price. And if they don't like it, you don't spend a dime. That's where I like Facebook a little bit more. I mean, sorry, that's where I like Google a little bit more. Ooh,
I have you recorded.
Bite my tongue.
By the way, I'm going to clip that out and then play it.
So that's the part that I like shopping. People have an intent to purchase something. They see your ad. If they say, "Ooh, I don't like the look of that. I don't like the price of that," they don't click. You don't spend it in dimes. So that's what I like.
We're going to be producing a crash course on Facebook, and it's going to be specific to using Facebook in order to feed smart shopping. The caveat I'm going to add to that is at the moment, Facebook is a really dangerous ecosystem because of all the changes that have been made. So just be careful with it. Yeah, we need to.
Awesome, if it's okay, just like continuing to the second part of the question, because it sounds like then Facebook kind of makes more sense for the low budget items, right? If you're running Facebook ads, is there any way Google catches it? So like, is it possible for me to like increase my ad spend on Facebook, decrease it on Google because Google is auto feeding it from Facebook? This is the weirdest thing I've asked, but I think you guys are the gurus, so I'll just like put it out there.
So the Facebook ads that are driving the traffic to the website is where Google picks up on. And that's what I was saying, like anything that Facebook drives to your website, Google is going to try to remarket to. So those will share an audience. Now, there's really nothing that says like, hey, if I'm running these Facebook ads and people are seeing them, Google's going to start to do the same thing. They're completely independent networks of each other where they do not share any sort of data. The only time that they share data is when they're both on a common digital property, which is your website, because your website has not only your Facebook cookie, but also your Facebook pixel, but also your Google Tag Manager.
Well, so John and I figured this out with, you remember the guys that fired us? Facebook, with their mobile browser, strips third-party tracking. They strip GTM, they strip analytics, they strip wicked reports. Facebook actively removes your ability to reconcile data if you're using the Facebook mobile browser, which is freaking nuts. It's nuts. Sorry, John, keep going.
No, but that was one of the reasons why we got fired, is because the Facebook was like, hey, we made 250 grand this month. And Google's like, hey, we made 250 grand this month. And the client's like, hey guys, I made 250 grand. You guys told me I made 500,000. We're like, yeah, we just can't tell you where exactly those conversion paths are going because they're both sharing the same audiences and they're overlapping a lot. And he ultimately just said like, yes, it wasn't, and I don't blame him. If someone said, hey, I can't figure out why we're making this money, where we're making money, where to spend it, I would probably want to see if someone else can figure it out too. Now, it doesn't matter who's doing the ads. You're never really going to be figuring it out. That's why we have
an agency that lied to them and told them that they could figure out cross-channel.
Yeah. And then they stopped running Google. So it's like, oh, okay. But yeah, that's why Northbeam exists. So that's why we're developing Northbeam, is so that that doesn't happen again. If I can tell you how much overlap rate between how many people clicked on a Facebook ad and how many people bought on Google, and what the overlap rate is. So of $200,000 in sales, 15,000 shared that same person, and they started here or they started there and they finished on the other side. So that's what we're developing now. But that's the only thing that we've been able to come up with, is just developing it ourselves, really, to try to figure that out. So yeah, that's
real quick question, or real quick comment on Manali's question is, and forgive me, Manali, because this is going to sound combative, but I actually think it's flawed thinking to try to decrease your ad spend. Coming from the paid ad manager, I realize my dad's got all these weird foreign old-timey sayings, and he says that the lion or the lamb should never ask the lion what's for dinner. So if you're talking to a paid ad manager, maybe don't take advice when it comes to how much you should spend. But I do believe that what you want to do is figure out where you can spend more, because it means that you're scaling. So you're putting in $1 and you're getting 10 out. And so don't think like, where can I scale down my Google ad spend? Because if your Google ad spend is working and functioning, you want to try to scale that up. So I don't like looking at ad budget as a limitation or even as a cost center. We want to look at it as a profit center. And if we're looking at it as a profit center, it means the more you're able to spend, the more you're able to make.
No, makes sense. Well, thanks a lot for those insights. Just helpful trying to think, right? I mean, am I paying both the platforms money to kind of target the same audience, or like what's happening? But sounds like so far there is a huge possibility it'll be an overlap, and there's no way we can tell who has performed better, Facebook or Google. So it's only like we'll have to try it out, and I'll have to figure out which platform is working better.
Well, the way to tell is to start with one. So you start with Google, you make Google work to some degree of efficacy, and then when you layer Facebook on, and this is flawed because there's other variables involved, but when you layer Facebook on, any improvement to Google is now conversion lift you can attribute to Facebook.
Makes sense.
With the exception of cyclical markets changing the ecosystem, etc. But that's the closest you can get to like real clarity until something like Northbeam is rolled out.
Yeah. This may not work because they're developing on Northbeam. So there we go. Here's something I want to share with you. On May 14th, this company started spending a lot more in Facebook. And what's interesting is we didn't change anything in our campaigns. But you see here, May 14th, you'll see the clicks and conversions start to rise. We didn't add any more budget. We've still been spending $1,000 a month. But if we look at May 14th compared to the previous period, what you can see is that all of a sudden their dynamic search and their branded 55% increase. This is 2 brand campaigns essentially, but all of a sudden they started getting double the amount of impressions in. And then look at what happened to Smart Shopping. That went up by 36 and 41%. So our impressions went from 1.5 million to 2.1 million. And our ROAS went down by 4%. That's okay, because we made 57% more money. We went from 33,000 to 52,000. We didn't do anything. We just ended up making 40 grand more. And so as soon as I saw this, I was like, hey, how's Facebook going? And he goes, oh, it's going pretty good. And then it's funny because we were looking at Northbeam, we're like, how did you know that they started Facebook? I said, we didn't make any changes. All of a sudden, everything just started performing better. And if we look at May 14th to here, I don't know if I can see it, but just give me a minute. This hopefully will give you a good idea. Spend globally for them is 78,000, and that looks like 26 days. But if I did 26 days before that, so it was May 14th. So let's just say the 20th through May 14th, 78,000, 54,000.
Oh, interesting.
All of a sudden they dumped in 20 grand. Now Facebook, he's like, it's going okay. Their Facebook didn't really do much better. It just spent more money and made more sales, but at pretty much similar ROAS. But all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, we're same ROAS of 558. We just ended up making 38 grand more. And all they did was just starting to spend more on Facebook. So no one can tell you this besides Northbeam, and that's what we're trying to figure out. But it's all of a sudden it's like, so Facebook, I'm spending 10, I'm making 10. I spent 30, I made 30. Well, that sucks. But over here, 40 grand more. That's where that is felt now. So don't think of it like independent networks. top conversion path goes like this, insanity wise. I mean, they saw a Facebook ad, then they saw a YouTube ad, then they clicked on a smart shopping ad, then they clicked on a Facebook ad, and then they clicked on your email, and then they went back to site directly, and then they bought. Well, who's the beneficiary? You, and then all of those channels that brought that person there. So the more channels you add, the better and stronger your brand becomes. It just becomes more expensive, and you can't look at it at a vacuum ecosystem. Because Facebook might show you, oh, you're just losing more money, especially because the attribution is crazy. But if you can see that other areas of your campaign are performing better, look at cash in, cash out. How much more did I spend? How much more did I make?
Jared's question, can Facebook restrictions or bans impact Google status on domain contamination? I have two answers. The first one is Facebook and Google have similar rules. So a Facebook ban may be a predictive indicator that you're doing something that might piss Google off. That aside, Google and Facebook hate each other with the passion of 1,000 fires covered in Tabasco sauce. So it's unlikely that anything that happens in Facebook that's negative would impact your Google. I think we've been banned. Our entire business manager was shut down with 70 clients inside of it in Facebook. Yvonne, who's on this call, was able to get us back up and running after Facebook said that we were permanently banned just by like being really intelligent with the way he kicked down doors. And it didn't impact our Google at all. So I don't think so. John, alternative view?
No, the same thing. You're going to find out though that what Facebook says or what Facebook recently got in trouble for, Google will secretly just kind of like adopt that same rule. And so that's an indicator that, like what Cosmo said, is if Facebook banned you, 2 months later, Google can say like, oh yeah, that's actually HIPAA violation. We agree. And so we actually, don't want to get also deposed in front of Congress like Zuckerberg did 2 months ago. So we're going to take that same approach. So sometimes those are lead indicators. Most of the time, Facebook gets attacked first because it's a simpler network that mostly gets attacked by Congress, but then Facebook follows, or Google follows suit right afterwards. So just know that those two do share issues with each other, but only because it's publicly available that they got in trouble for it, of a breach of violation of policy and privacy. Then Facebook, and then Google does the same thing.
And for some reason, the regulators have it hot to trot for Facebook, and I don't know why. I actually think I prefer Google to Facebook, but I think the antitrust case is way easier to make with Google than it is with Facebook, and yet they keep targeting Facebook. I don't know if it's like their trial run before they go after Google, but right now Facebook is the one to watch for, like John's saying, legislative violations that we all need to adjust for.
Whether you lean right or left, and this is not going to get political by any means, but when Trump got banned from Twitter, all the Republican lawmakers started to question Zuckerberg. So it became a like red versus blue issue and was highly publicized on social media. So he got banned from Facebook, got banned from Twitter. And all of a sudden you have Republican lawmakers are like, why? How are you guys doing this? And why are you doing this? The other side of the aisle was a little bit less, like, that's okay. That's all right. You can ban. So I think that it's highly politicized, but that's the reason for, I think, that why Facebook got under fire is because they were in the spotlight for things that happened politically.
Well, I happen to know you like red shoes and I like blue shoes. So Osama says, I guess it's because Facebook is a platform where everybody's active, making their stuff more blue. I think Osama's right. Facebook is an easier target because they're actually a target. They're an embodied entity. They're easy to look at. Google's this disembodied sort of like exists everywhere thing, and it's hard to pinpoint where it exists and what it does. Which makes
also, oops, sorry,
that was it.
They're done. Also, the Russian interference from 2016, whether of course you believe it or not, doesn't matter. The ripple effect from that was, well, how is Russia using social media to change the minds of people? So back in 2016, the ball was kind of started to roll back then with Russian interference. They said, well, Russian interference was through social media. They were taking out ads on Facebook and they were bad mouthing Hillary, and so they were saying like, well, how do we make sure that the people that control the country stay in control of the country? Well, you attack social media because of it. So that's just, but it doesn't matter again, whether it's left or right. I don't want to be political at all, but that was just the reason for why social media became such a hot topic from 2016 through today, still from a regulation standpoint and privacy.